Hey everybody, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about Rome from its beginnings as a republic and its end as an empire. Alright, so Rome starts off as a small city on the Italian peninsula, and they begin to grow out of paranoia that their neighboring cities were going to try and overtake them. The Romans really did not like kings or one-man rule, and this inspired them to be freaked out and take over all of their neighbors. Rome begins in about 500 BC as a republic, and by 500 AD it is the Roman Empire. So it's an empire that spans about 1,000 years, and BC and AD. They have a couple, actually three, Punic Wars where they battle with the Carthaginians, but they end up defeating them, so we're just going to skip all that and go straight into the beginnings of the Republic and how it functioned. Now, the Romans inspired a lot of Enlightenment thinkers during the 1700s with the way that they created their governmental system. So the Senate was a body of aristocrats, and most senators were wealthy landowners. Now, they also had a consul. They actually had two consuls, and a consul was kind of like a president. It was the guy in charge, to put it plainly. But they were so terrified of one-man rule that they had to make sure that there were two people to balance power out. So my professor explained it to us like, imagine if Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump both won the presidency and then they had to agree on everything that was best for the country. A plebeian, or a plebe, or a pleb, depending on who you ask, was anyone that was a non-aristocrat, and they were in charge of electing 10 tribunes. The word republic actually comes from Latin, the res publica, which means that public thing. So roughly translated, that's exactly what republic means. An interesting fact is that to be a consul, you had to work your way up and you had to do all of the governmental jobs. So you had to be a military commander, you had to be a judge, you had to be an accountant, you had to do it all if you wanted to be a consul and kind of end out your career that way. They also had voting ballots, because like ancient Greece, they were concerned with voting. The army commanders frequently tried to win support of the people and the Senate by their conquests of land and loot. And the Romans would vote themselves money, similarly to how we do in the United States, where we vote for tax cuts, or we vote for free college, or we vote for you name it. They would do the same thing during that time period. Now we're going to talk about the Roman Civil War, which happens around the time of Caesar. So they have a civil war, and their solution is to create a triumvirate. If you hear that word and you think three, you're right on track. Rule of three men. This way they would avoid a king and a civil war. So the first triumvirate was made up of three guys: Crassus, Pompey, and Julius Caesar. Now, for the beginning, everything's going pretty smoothly. Pompey marries Julia, who's Caesar's daughter. Crassus gives Caesar money. Caesar conquers Gaul and then writes a book about how awesome it is. And then Pompey decides that he wants to do the same thing as Caesar. Pompey and Caesar were really good generals. Crassus was just a rich lady. Well, he wasn't a lady, but I can't say the B word. He was rich, but he had no military brains. He was just really good at real estate, loan sharking, and having fire station scams, which is, fire stations are important, but that's how he would make money. Same things going on back in the old days as are now. But because of this, he had serious FOMO about, being a military general, and he decided to buy his own army and head to Parthians. And he was not a good general. He died, and the Parthians used his head as a prop and pour gold down his throat to make fun of him. But why is the Republic important? That's where we're headed. Because it allows a minority voice through separation of powers. If you put duct tape over a particular group's mouth, they'll start to use their fist. That is what we learned in class. Rome was really mad that Caesar didn't give up his army, so they want to charge him. And if you've ever heard the phrase crossing the Rubicon, that goes back to this time in history. you're not supposed to bring your army back. Like, think about if the United States just brought all of the military on Washington, D.C., that would be akin to what's going on right now. But Caesar does this anyway. Pompey and the Senate are freaked out, so they leave, and then they have this wild, crazy chase around the Mediterranean, and Pompey and Caesar run to Egypt. Now, there is a civil war in Egypt between Cleopatra and her brother, who she is also married to. Throwback, listen to my Egypt episode. Pompey gets to Egypt first, and then Cleopatra's little brother decides that he's going to kill Pompey to show loyalty to Caesar and get on his good side. But Caesar doesn't really love that. It kind of freaks him out a little bit. But he does love Cleopatra. He loves Cleopatra. So in Egypt, Caesar realizes that Egypt is a big, big deal. Cleopatra has big money. She has Egypt. And they have a love child together who inspires the name for Little Caesars. His name is Caesarion, which means Little Caesar, and I'm sure he always said pizza, pizza. After all of that takes a couple years, Caesar returns to Rome, and this is when everyone wants to stab him because they realize he was being a big tyrant and basically breaking all of the rules and causing drama, and nobody wanted that. The Roman people really liked him, but the Senate disliked that he was trying to fill the Senate with his own appointees, kind of like FDR during the court packing scandal. Mark Antony is the new guy in charge. He was Caesar's right-hand man, and he decides that he wants to go to Egypt. We love Egypt in Rome. Cleopatra is there, and then they fall in love, and they have children, and then think that it would be a really cool idea to split Rome up and make them little kingdoms for their children. Now, there's a third character who is Caesar's grandnephew. His name is Octavian. He was buddies with Mark, but then he turns on Mark, and they fight. Mark loses and commits suicide. And Octavian goes after Cleopatra. He tries to make her a prisoner of war so that he can basically parade her around Rome and then kill her. She tried to go to India, but instead they captured her, and then she tried to seduce him. And it didn't work because she was kind of old at this point. And then she killed herself with a snake so she wouldn't be a prisoner of war. Then Octavian decides to change his name to Augustus and call himself the first citizen. He becomes very imperial, an emperor, a top statesman, a religious leader, a god. He makes Rome a dictatorship and an empire. And now he gives himself a new name, Augustus Caesar. With all of this going on, I'm sure it's not hard for you to see why Rome fell. They had a lot of problems with hereditary succession and armies over choosing emperors and being loyal to a general instead of an emperor. Rome becomes also concerned with bread and circuses at this time, so they're focused really on entertainment and not the struggles of their own government. And because of this, they are susceptible to invasions by the Germanic tribes that are outside of Rome. There is a guy that comes to power. His name is Diocletian. He tries to be a god, but ends up splitting Rome into east and west. He comes up with this brilliant plan to freeze job positions, freeze prices so there's no inflation, freeze religion, basically just keep everything how it is. So that nothing happens. He also creates a fun system called the Tetrarchy, which is a rule of 4 men, and then he decides that he wants to retire and just leaves Rome to the Tetrarchy. Then Constantine comes to power, who I'm sure you've heard of. Constantine reigned from 306 to 337. He continues the policies of Diocletian, but he moves the capital from Rome to Constantinople, which is a big thing. Also, Constantinople is Istanbul now. It's Istanbul, not Constantinople. But he converts to Christianity, which means the whole Roman Empire converts to Christianity, which is a big deal because now it's legal. If you remember or know anything about the Bible, Jesus was persecuted by the Romans because he was, the Christian guy, and he was spreading Christianity. The Roman Empire lasts in the West about another 100 years until the Germanic invasions, where they basically just push into Rome and bring it to ruins. And that is how Rome falls. Pretty sad. It's a bummer. Thank y'all so much for listening. I will see you in the next episode.